yeah, that looks nice. So this is the default arm that I always build first, is the two-piece arm, but I also like to be able to have an option to where I have just a single piece for the entire arm that's a little easier and quicker to move, where I don't have to manipulate two different pieces. So I am going to show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here into the arm, and I want to add a new layer, and I want to call it arm underscore sync. And I'm going to make these all capital so it stands out. Add and close. And I am going to connect it. You don't have to connect it, but if you group it, it will connect itself, and it looks kind of weird, so you want to connect it yourself. While I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and title these composites. I'm just going to call this upper arm comp and wrist comp. I'm going to get rid of that composite. You don't want extra composites if you can help it. It slows harmony down. Here, I'd like to say something about composites. If you go to your preferences and choose default pass-through composite, that's how I like to work. Every time you make a new composite, it'll be set to pass-through. The shape is like a little trapezoid, which is what you're seeing on all my composites. And that allows you to do Z-depth nudging so that you can scoot the forearm behind the body and other pieces in front of or behind with keyframes. The problem is when you use too many of those kinds of composites, the pass-through variety, it can slow harmony down. And so the solution is to either use less composites, or if you set them to bitmap mode versus the pass-through mode, that can also help to speed things up. The bitmap mode for composites, that's the default way that Harmony creates them unless you check this preference. With bitmap mode, it will flatten all of the pieces that are coming through that particular composite. If you had bitmap mode set on the bottom composite of the arm, and then you tried to do Z-depth to scoot the forearm in front of the body or behind the body, no matter what you do, Harmony will not allow that to be Z-depth nudged in front of or behind. Okay. So that's all looking good, and actually, to tell you the truth, I could probably get rid of both of these composites. And I know it looks a little bit like a nightmare now, but we know how we plugged it together and it's working pretty good, so I think I would prefer to go this way. And actually, I want to go into composites just a little bit more right here. What if you built your whole rig and all of them are set to bitmap composites? Let me show you the difference here. So this trapezoid shape, this means that it is a pass-through composite. The mode is set to pass-through. You could change it to bitmap. Notice that it turns to a rectangle when you do that. So you probably don't want to have to do this individually for all of them. So let me show you this really cool button. If you select all of your composites, you can just select everything. And then you click on this button. It's called Set Properties on Many Layers. It's 3 boxes with 3 green check marks. You click on that and you can actually choose composite mode, leave it as it is, or you can choose as bitmap or as pass-through. So right now we want all of these in the arm to be pass-through so that we can layer the hand and the forearm and the upper arm. So we hit OK. So that should save you some time in case you are on the bitmap by default composite mode. And one other thing to note is you can go ahead and holding Alt and then left clicking if you drag across your main group, or if you're here in your rig you want to make sure to select everything. You hold Alt and Alt is going to select everything inside of your groups as well, and then you can choose Set Properties on Many Layers and choose the mode that you want for pass-through if that's the way you want to go. Alright, but back to the arm. I wanted to just tell you that I went ahead and deleted those composites that had been here, just because the less composites that are passed through, the easier it's going to be to animate and rotate pieces on your rig. Now this looks like a nightmare, as I said before. If you hover over these ports, it'll tell you where these are coming from. As you can see, this says Mat Cutter 2, and I could go ahead and label this so it said something like Mat Upper Arm Cutter, or matte underscore upper arm color art. I could label them that way. I usually don't bother, but I do find it is worth naming your composites, especially when you come out here to the main rig. When you come out here to the main rig, you have all of these cables coming from all over, and so it can be nice if you have them labeled here. So, oh, this is from the torso. Okay, this one's from the face. So it's just good to have that. All right, back to the arm. I'm going to show you how to sync a layer. So whenever you're syncing layers, you want to make sure to do it this way. It's best to do the syncing earlier on. I'm going to select all three of these layers that I want to sync, and then I'm going to switch to selection only mode in my timeline so I can see those three. So I can see that I have drawing 1 showing right now on those 2 layers. I should also have a drawing 1 showing on the sync layer. So I'm just going to create an empty drawing there. Create empty drawing, and by default it comes in named 1. Cool. So now that they're all named the same thing before we sync, I'm going to select the 2 layers, the forearm and the upper arm, and holding Control to select them both. And then I'm going to come here in the node view to nodes, sync layer width, and then I'm going to click in the drop down and type sync, and I'm going to choose the arm sync and hit OK. Okay, now you'll see whenever I click on one of these now, there's this little link icon, this little chain that shows that they're synced. Or here in the node view, if I click on one of them, you'll see these 2 little black boxes on the right side showing that they're all synced. That means that they're all going to swap whenever you swap a drawing, and they'll all swap at the same time. So we could swap them all off at once, or we could create a new drawing. I want to first name this arm that we've created so far. I want to name it properly. So this arm has 2 pieces, the upper arm and the lower arm. I'm going to show the deformers. I want to name this arm properly so it's easier to find which cell swap I'm using in the drawing substitutions. I'm going to exit the peg selection mode so I can select the drawings. They're showing up here. Pressing Control and middle mouse scroll to zoom in, or you can use this little scrubber right here. I want to rename these to 2-piece. Now you'll notice that all of a sudden the deformation chain is no longer hooked up to it anymore, and it's no longer hooked up to the forearm or the upper arm, because now that these are synced, I renamed one and it renamed both. You see how forearm and upper arm are both renamed. And Harmony is looking for drawing number 1. That's the drawing that the deformation chain was associated with before. So I'm going to show you how to fix broken deformation chains. What we can do is we can choose the upper arm, and then in the drop down for the deformation chains we can choose transformation 1. Okay, so there you go. It's got transformation 1 applied to it. I'm going to show you in the layer properties what's happening. I'm going to go into the deformation group and click on this transformation switch. You'll see that it says, okay, I'm transformation chain 1, and I am familiar with drawing number 1, and now that I selected from the drop down right over here, it also knows that it belongs with 2-piece. So whenever this drawing is exposed on the timeline, this deformation chain is going to show up with it. So I am now going to get rid of number 1 because I don't have a drawing named number 1 anymore. Just cleaning things up. And I am going to go ahead and name this group. I'm going to name it 2-piece. And I also want to name the deformation chain. I'm going to change that. Instead of it being called transformation 1, I'm going to call that 2-piece. So now you can see when I just renamed that here, there's default transformation 2-piece. It also updated that name here, 2-piece. And then we named the group as well. So I know that sounds really complicated and weird, but it makes it nice and clean. So let's do the same thing with the forearm. I'm just going to jump in here and I'm going to rename this to 2-piece. In the transformation switch, instead of having it linked up with drawing number 1, I could just type in 2_piece, and you'll see that automatically when I did that, it now associated that deformation chain with the drawing. The other way that I could have done it is to have just selected the drawing and then chosen that second chain, and it automatically puts that name in here separated by a semicolon. Get rid of drawing 1. Sorry, I know this is complex. You can just watch it a few times if it's helpful. And then I want to rename transformation 1 to 2-piece. So click on transformation switch, click on the rename transformation button, and click on 2-piece. If you do not have the rename transformation button here in the deformation toolbar, you can right click and choose customize, and then you can grab it. It'll be sitting over here, and you can click on it and use the arrows to move it back and forth to your toolbar or off of your toolbar. We now have all of those. So now what we want to do is we want to make another arm. Okay, so to make another arm, remember earlier on that we had made a duplicate on the upper arm. We had copied that full arm. This is why. Here we go. I'm going to click on that. Used to be named drawing 2. I want that to now be called drawing 1-piece. So Control D to rename and call it 1-piece, okay? And let's go ahead and look at that drawing just so it's easier to see what we're dealing with. Okay, remember this drawing, it's just drawn like that. It's blocky and straight, and it's ready for us to use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the upper arm master peg, go to the timeline, collapse it with center on selection. I'm going to add a keyframe to everything by pressing F6. I'm going to press copy, and I'm going to press paste. Oh. Okay, I'm going to go back to normal view mode. Right now I'm in selection only mode, which is a little funky. You can't see everything. So I am going to insert a keyframe on all the layers with F6, copy that, and paste it on the second frame. This is the quarter view, and I have the profile view on the third frame. Anyways, here I'm going to go ahead and go to the arm. I'm going to reset all the pegs on the arm. Press reset. I'm going to reset all the deformers. Select the drawing that used to be called number 2, and I am going to go with center on selection. I'm going to rename it, press Control D. I'm going to call this 1_piece. So this will be a 1-piece arm. Instead of having it look so pointy, I'm pretty sure I want to just have it look not quite so straight. Okay, so this is on the upper arm, and let's just see if the forearm, yeah, the forearm is empty. Good. So with the upper arm, we're going to have the entire arm here. So I'm going to go to the drawing view, and I'm going to paint that, and then I'm going to get out of this mode. And you can use this red selector if you want. It'll select everything of whatever color you just clicked on. I'm going to cut that, go to the color art, paste it, flatten it, exit out of that red selector mode. I think I want to add a little bit of tapering to these. And so now what I want to do with this is I want to add a new deformation chain to it. So I have the art layer selected, upper arm. I have it named what I want it to be named. And now I'm going to click on the rigging tool, and I'm going to press the plus to create a new deformation chain. And what it has done is it said, okay, we're going to put a new group in here. And so I am going to add just 2 points. And if I test it, you can see that that's going to work really nice for doing really fast cartoony arms where I don't want to have it look so straight. Alright, so I'm going to call this, I'm going to rename that deformation group. I'm going to call it 2 point. Okay, I'm actually going to name this 1-piece, and I'm going to have the transformation switch. I'm going to rename that chain. Most of the time it's fine to leave the transformations named transformation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just when you're adding many different options, it is a good idea to go ahead and name them something intelligible. So that's my one-piece arm. And I'm going to go ahead and solo the upper arm just so I can make sure that I put those deformation points in a good place. Yeah, putting it past the end is probably a good idea here. As you can see, the forearm doesn't have anything. Hold on, let me get out of solo mode so I can clearly show you what's going on here. Full screen, get that display, and I want to show you through what's going on here. Okay, let's show display number 3. Alright, so here is the upper arm, and the forearm has nothing. And that's actually what we want. So when it's the 2-piece, you'll have that, but because these are synced, they're both switching at the same time. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to do another one-piece arm, but I want to call this 4-point. Let me show you what I want to do with that. So I'm going to take this arm, and let's see, I no longer need that center circle for this, but I do think it would be good to add some more geometry. I'm using the contour editor, just in case I really want to bend this thing. I don't want it to look jagged and fractally looking. I find it best to put a little extra down here near the corners, because that's where you usually run into issues the most. And you guessed it, I'm going to need to repaint this guy. Select that, cut it, get rid of the old one, paste this. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to go to the next frame, so frame 3, collapse the upper arm master peg. I'm going to insert a keyframe F6 on everything, copy and paste that to frame number 3, and then I'm going to go down to this drawing again, press O, center on selection, and I'm going to press Control-Shift-D, or Alt-Shift-D, that's duplicate, or there's this button right here that will duplicate a drawing for you. This one I'm going to call 4-point. The art is going to be exactly the same, but I'm going to give it a different deformation chain. So here I am, I select the art, I click on the deformer tool, and I am going to make a new deformation chain. I'm going to go full screen so I can see very easily what I'm doing. Again, I'm going to put these points up there at the top for the unfinished line. Hold Alt to break that. Oh, I forgot to close it. Click on that guy and hold Alt as I click there. And a lot of the time I just like to leave that up, extending past. The reason that I'm not breaking this is because I find that when you leave it curved, it sometimes handles the deformation a little bit better. So this is going to be my 4-point arm. So I've already named the drawing 4-point, and now let's just go through and make sure everything else is good. Instead of the group being called 3, I'm going to call it 4-point. And instead of the transformation being called a random name, I'm going to name it 4-point. I'm going to exit out of there. I'm going to go back to my normal display. I'll show you what the purpose of doing a 4-point is. Sometimes you want to do a smear frame where the arm is going to move really fast. And so here with the 4-point, the animation tools, I can go ahead and do this. It's pretty sweet. Or I can use it to pose stuff like that, blur frame stuff. Or maybe he's going to do push-ups and his arm needs to look like that, and I want it really stylish. So yeah, now that I've got all, I can, instead of pressing undo, I can just go here and reset all the keyframes. Now that I have these three options for the arms, as you can see, I can swap through them, and if I'm showing the deformers, the deformation chains, they swap at the same time because they are associated with that drawing. And so even though 4-point and one piece use the exact same art, like we duplicated it so that the deformation chain could have an independent drawing to associate with. I now have my arm and it has the three separate swaps. Next up, I want to show you how to do a layered hand. Sometimes you'll want to put a prop into a hand or something like that. Let me just show you an example really quick. Let's just add a drawing layer, prop. Let's attach it up here. Let's plug it in. Alright, let's just draw something. Okay, so let's say we want him to be able to hold that in his hand. So we've got the overlay, line art, color art, and underlay. In general, for almost all the hands that we make, they're going to be on line art and color art. But in cutout animation, you might end up drawing 100 different hands for your rig. I like to name the drawings intelligibly instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So with this one, I would probably name it, instead of 1, I would call this default _000, and I'm just thinking about angles of the hand. So like this is 000, this would be 180 on this side, and this would be 90, this would be 270. I like to do that because then I can draw default 00, point 00, fist 00, fist 180, point 180, default 180, and it's consistent and it's easier when you're swapping through the drawings that it just looks like it's doing a 360 turn. I'll tell you the prefixes I like to use on my hands. Default, carry, those are usually like lifting hands or explaining hands, they carry on. Sometimes I separate the fingers on those. Another prefix I like to use is fist, and another point. And the last one I use is X, and then I just put extra hands in there that don't categorize into the other 4 categories. I will show you really quick my hand built out in a different file. So these are a bunch of hands that I had drawn for my character. I'll go ahead and show you how I'm separating these hands. Now I could go ahead and plug the prop in behind the overlay, okay? So if I can get part of the hand to be on the overlay part of this layer, that would be great. I'm going to go into the hand, drawing, reset the view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut like this right here. I used the cutter tool. Now I'm going to use the width editor tool, the pencil editor tool, and I'm going to make both of those circular. I'm going to cut those, paste them on the overlay layer, use the stroke tool, K, show my strokes, Alt Y to paint the skin color, go back to the camera, look at that. That hand is now layered because the overlay art is showing up in front of, to the left of, the prop. But sometimes it's nice to be able to even animate part of the hand separately. We can copy the hand and then we can paste the hand. Now generally I would not recommend copy and pasting any drawing layers or peg layers in Harmony because it makes a timed clone, which usually in most cases is not desirable. This is one of the few cases where it is with the hand. This is an exception to the main rule for me. So copy and paste, Control C, Control V, and I'm going to plug that in here, plug that in here. I'm going to paste 2 more just so I can use all 4 sublayers if I need to. So let's show you what's happening, okay? I'm going to go ahead and get that display that I had before. Plug it in under here. Access the display. Okay, so here's the hand. Here's this one. These are all the exact same hand. Alright, sometimes I think it's easier to understand this concept of the clones if you actually look at the project file saved on your computer. So I'm here in Windows and I'm going to go into Elements, and you can see that every piece of the rig that I drew has a folder. So here I've got the hand folder, and it has all of these drawings that I've drawn for it, and there's a backup of all of them. That's what the little squiggle tilde copies are here. And so as we're working in the hand and we've copied and pasted those, they're all referencing this folder. So whenever we draw a new hand on one of those layers, it's going to be available to all of them because they're all referencing this folder. So let me show you what we're going to do. We're just going to filter, so we're only letting overlay come through this. So I'm just going to name this hand OL, and then we'll just name these others accordingly. Hand underscore LA, hand underscore CA, hand underscore UL. Full screen. Remember, there's going to be prefixes that are coming in here, so I'm just going to scoot these apart a little further. I don't think I'm going to need this auto patch. So now what we can do is we can add independent pegs for everything. So let's call this, instead of hand P, let's just call it hand MP. And then let's go ahead and add, just select them all, press Ctrl Shift P. And then let's Alt slide those into there. And actually, I'm going to leave the line art one and the color art one out separate. 98% of the time, a hand is going to be drawn on the line art and the color art. So for the most part, I do not want to have like duplicate pegs in here where I could separate the line and the color. Here, I'll show you what it would look like if I left it here. Okay, so let me plug into down here by the hand. Alright, so if I were to select that, you can see that moves. The line art's moving independently of the color art. I don't think I want that by default, and I don't want to have to parent up every time I want to move the hand. To avoid that, I'm just going to leave these pegs out, and I will leave them here. And so if I wanted to have that, fine amount of being able to move each of those separately, then I would just drag them in when I need them, but for right now I'll just leave them out. Now I do want to go ahead and copy the rotation information, the pivot, to all of the others. So I'm going to use that cartoon flow script, the copy paste pivots, copy the pivots, select all those, paste the pivots. So you might think, oh well, that's weird, Matt. You have this hand but the pivot's up there. Didn't you want to put a pivot in a separate spot for each finger? You could, but I find that this works just fine, because you're going to end up, this is going to be the front of the hand sometimes, this is going to be the back of the hand at other times, the thumb will be here, the back fingers will be here on this overlay layer. So what you can do is when you're animating it, you can simply come up here, you can temporarily move the pivot when you're using the animate current frame and the transform tool. When you move the pivot, you see that the ghost is left behind. As soon as you deselect, the pivot goes back to where it belongs. So it'll just stay in this point until you deselect from it, and then you can select it, move it around. As you can see, it would probably be a good idea for me to get rid of some of the color art while I'm thinking about it. Use the cutter tool. And I'm on the color art layer. Okay, so now when I animate just this portion of the hand, it can like grip something tighter. Kind of nice. There are other ways that you can build a hand. If you wanted more than 4 sublayers, you could, the same way that we built the arm, you've got the forearm and the upper arm synced. You could have as many hand pieces as you want if you want to make like enough pieces for thumbs and stuff, and you could just sync them. Same way we did with the arm. Okay, so one advantage to putting separate pegs on the overlay and the underlay is sometimes your prop will be way out here. You might not want to put the prop inside of the rig. You might want it to be outside of the rig. Maybe he's picking up a rock or something and it's just out here. You need to pick the right display. So let's say that this is sitting out here, it's in front of the character. I'm going to bring it forward in Z-space, Alt down. So what you can do now is, because this part of the hand is separated, it has its own peg, you can apply Z-depth to that, pressing Alt down a whole bunch of times. You can see in the coordinate toolbar that it's moving it forward. Wow, maybe there's like a composite that needs to be adjusted or something. I'm just going to straight type it 0.1. Okay, the reason that that thing was not layering is because the composite below my main composite is set to Bitmap, which flattens it. It doesn't allow Z-depth order. So now I'm going to go to pass-through, and now it will allow Z-depth ordering. I think that that's actually good that you got to see that. So now if I were to reset that hand, you see right now it's at 0.0079F. If I reset and it goes to zeros and ones, it's not in front. Let me just bring it forward. There you go. And so that's how you can make a layered hand. That's my preference, is I like to keep it down to just those 4 sub-layers for the hand. Okay, so finishing touches for this arm. Get rid of the extra display that I don't need. I am going to add a handle for the arm. I'll show you why. Right now, if I were animating this arm, I would select and then press B, 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 B. Oh, I went too far. Shift B, come back down, and then I can rotate this. So instead of having to push B, B, B and Shift B all the time, I like to make a handle. It's something like this, so I can quickly select the upper part of the arm, or I can quickly select the face, or select the mouth, or the torso, so I don't have to push B, 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 Shift B. So let me just show you really quick how to do that. Control R, let's do arm underscore handle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to plug it in underneath the upper arm master peg. And then we are going to plug this in front of everything on the arm composite. And now I've made a handle swatch color. I'm going to press Alt equals to make a circle, an ellipse, and I'm going to do paint bucket, delete that outline. I just need the circle. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw something so that I know it's an arm. I can use any color I want. I'm going to press O on the screen and drag to resize on the fly. Just draw something here to help me remember what it is. Okay, that's the arm handle, and it's only exposed for one drawing. I want to, if I click on it and I press extend exposure, I can extend it to frame like 901, and so now it'll be visible forever. I want to tell Harmony not to render this out, so when I push render, I don't want to see the handle, I just want to see the character. To get that to work, I want to add, I'm going to press enter in the node view. This is in Harmony 20, type viz for visibility, plug this in underneath it, and then I'm going to click on the properties and choose do not render. So now in render view we won't see it, so it's just there to help us, so we can select that really quick. The last thing that I want to do is I want to color the upper arm master peg, and let me show you how you can do that. So sometimes I'm going to do animation on one arm of the rig and I want to copy it to the other arm. So like if I were doing this or this, I might want to copy the animation from one to the other, and with all of these layers it's nice if I can just color it. So I'm just going to color it orange. Now if you don't have this change track color, you can right click and choose customize, and you can add change track color to your toolbar in the timeline. This makes it really easy to know which layer to copy and paste from. So now I'm going to select all of these arm pieces, and I'm going to press Control G to group, and that is good. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to go inside. It added some weird, oh yeah, because these pegs were not hooked up, it added some extra cables to it. This is where you want to use the cable cutter. You don't need them. You want them to be there, but not hooked up. I'm going to name it arm. Before I move on, I saw that when I rendered this, the forearm was a little funky looking. It didn't quite, there's a little jagged looking thing there. I don't think it's a big deal, and I think most people wouldn't worry about it, but I guess this could be a reason why you might want to leave the lines perfectly lined up, so I think I will go ahead and just do that really fast. I'm going to click on this button, which is Enable Deformers. I'm going to uncheck that. I'm going to copy this arm to frame 4, and then I'm going to reset everything. Select everything, press R to reset, and then reset the deformers. And then I am going to, let's render this and see if there's that jag. No, I think it looks pretty good. I am going to go up here to my rigging tool, and I will go ahead and perfectly align them so that they're right on top of each other. It'll make it a little easier to know how to line them back up later. Let's enable the deformers again. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, there's a tiny thing there, but I'm just going to leave it. Sometimes you just pick your battles, and that is fine with me. Better to get it done than to make it perfect, I think. That's what I'm told, so. And I'm trying to battle that myself. Perfectionist stuff can take a long time. So once you have the arm built, we're going to clone it. I have a whole video about it. I'm just going to go through it really quick right here. You can go watch the other video. I'm going to put this arms backdrop behind here. I'm going to switch back to OpenGL view. I'm going to delete this prop. We don't need it. I'm going to show my arm reference, and I am going to disable the previous arm that I had. Control H to add a composite, Alt to hold it in so it's underneath there. I'm going to call this my arms composite. Now, as you'll notice, one thing that you want to do before you're all done is you want to go ahead and add your prefix to all of your layers. So let's do that really quick before we forget about it. I'm going to hold Alt. While I'm holding Alt, it's going to select the group and everything inside of the group. And then I'm going to use this node view add prefix suffix button. Prefix, insert text, mat underscore, and hit OK. Now, you want to add these prefixes before you add any master controllers later on. Master controllers are dependent on matching up with what your layers were named when they're created, so make sure to do this. Next thing I'm going to do is I am going to select the arm and clone drawings only, not drawings and timing. This means that everything will be referenced from the same folder, but it won't swap and move at the same time. Now I'm going to add a peg, Control P, and I'm going to mirror. I'm going to move this to where I want it to be. Okay. And I'll even just move this peg temporarily. I'm going to scale it down a little because it's behind him. I'm going to press Alt up, pushing it back in Z space a little ways. I want to make sure it's behind his legs. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so there it is. I want to make that a permanent peg. If anybody comes back and presses R, I don't want this to happen where it appears that the arm is now missing. I want to use, I'm going to press Enter, static transformation. I need to plug it in below the peg. Then I'm going to go into the properties, and I am going to say bake incoming parents transformation. And you can see that it saves all this information that was on that peg. It appears that the arm got moved again. I'm just going to move that out because it's actually just happening twice. Delete that. So this is a static transformation, and if people press reset, it won't reset. So this arm will always stay on this side of the body forever. And I'm going to go ahead and name it I'm going to call this mat underscore arm underscore static transformation. And I'm going to rename this as mat arm clone because I want to remember that this is a clone of the other one. They will both update at the same time if I update any of them. There I've got both of my arms built. I would now go through and keyframe the rest of the views of my rotation. Right now I have the two-piece arms as the default, so whenever I start animating I'm always going to have the default arm to start with, but I can easily just click on the drawing to swap it to the 4-point or to the one piece. Let's also talk about how you could add a kinematic output below the upper arm. You could add a kinematic output under here and then on top of there, but I find that it's kind of bothersome. I know some of you are going to want to know about that kinematic output workflow, so I'm going to go ahead and show you a very simplified way to use it where you might actually benefit from using it. Okay, so I've got a stick arm and a stick hand layer that I just made. I'm going to go ahead and draw a hand real quick. And then here's an arm. I'm going to go ahead and press Control-Shift-P. I want to add a peg to both of them. And normally what I would do is add an additional peg on top so that I could, I'm going to set the pivot points really fast, Alt-3, put that there. I'm going to put this up here, set the pivot on all three of those. So if I were using my animation tools, I could click on the hand and rotate it. I could parent up. I could move both at the same time. Or with the arm, I could move it or scale it independently if I wanted to. Now, I'm going to add the deformer group to the stick arm. Get the rigging tool, add the group, and then using the envelope deformer mode, I am going to just use 2 points. And then I'll test it to show you that that's working. Okay. Usually when you first start Harmony and you first start Deformers, you figure, oh, I should be able to just put the hand underneath the deformation group. And I'll show you the benefits of that. Great. It moves with the end of the arm. That's pretty cool as long as you've got a spaghetti arm. If you start moving this a lot, you can see that it starts to break and deform with this deformer. And so that's why Toon made the kinematic output. And so if I go ahead and I press enter and I say kinematic output, and then I slide it in between the deformation group and the hand peg, you'll see that the hand will now move properly, but it won't deform with the parent. But still you get the problem that when you're quickly posing some stuff out, if you wanted to put the hand somewhere and you wanted to independently try to scale or skew the arm, that's not going to happen for you because of the way that this is set up. So that's one of the drawbacks to using the kinematic output and trying to put more than one thing underneath a deformation chain. Some people will try to put, a deformation chain down the spine and then try to connect arms underneath the spine, and honestly I find that it's just better to only let deformers be associated with one piece of art and then do most of all that other stuff with pegs and rotation and squash and stretch and scale. I don't like that workflow, so you can do it if you want to, but I like to keep it independent so that I can change this shape to whatever I want without affecting these other things at all. And as you can see, when we switch to the one piece, the wrist is now behind, the cuff is now in front of this, so I might want to adjust the ordering here so that it functions more the way I want to. I don't want to have to fix that every single time. So I may go ahead and just move all of these in front of the forearm. That's nice. Now when I switch to this, the only issue is that when I move this, it's going to show this crease, but I can easily just press Alt down and then I'll have the crease from the lower limb, so that's not bad. The only other thing I see is that it looks like because I didn't finish the lines on the top of the arm, we are missing that shoulder piece. Let me show you what I would do if I decided that I wanted to adjust something. I'm going to show you how to update a cloned group. So here we go. I'm going to go into there. I'm going to go to the drawing, Shift X to reset the size. Here, this is a perfect example of why you want to save that circle just in case you need it. Turn it black from the overlay layer. I'm going to thin that guy down. Press Shift and then press down. And press down a little bit more. Cut. Get rid of that stroke. Select these, join them. Okay, so that fixes that problem. But we have another problem. That is, what happens when it comes down like this? And I don't want to see the completed circle. I'm going to go ahead and update it here in the back arm just to show you an example of what I like to do. Okay, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to add a display, Control Y, put it down here, get rid of that duplicate matte stuff, display 2, display 2. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to add a shoulder trimmer. Okay, just Control R to add a drawing. I'm going to add peg, Control P. I think I want this to move with the whole thing. I'm actually just going to copy that circle. So as you can see, I have the arm handle selected. Now I'm going to go to the shoulder trimmer, press paste. I'm going to go ahead and do this, make like a little shape here. I'm going to give this my cutter color. It's just bright, easy to see. I'm going to copy from the line art and paste on the overlay, and I'm going to Shift Alt, scale it down, and I'm going to give this the handle color. So you can see I've got those two. Take this stuff and put it on the underlay. Sometimes I like to just put my cutting stuff on the underlay and the hidden stuff on the overlay. Just different conventions you can try to use if you want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the overlay and put it here. And I want the underlay. I'm going to go back to that toolbox that I have. Copy that. Just make sure to put matte in front of that. You don't have to, but it's nice, it's organized, it's all the same. Use the select tool and apply to line and color art. I'm going to select it all. I'm just going to move it to where I think is a good default starting position for it. I'm going to plug underlay. I want it to cut the lines away. You see that we're already having lines cut away from the upper arm from the forearm. So I'm going to add another composite, Control H. Add a composite, plug this in, great, and I'm just going to name it Matte Upper Arm Line Trimmer Composite. And then I want to plug this in so that I can see this little handle that I made. I'm going to copy the visibility, paste it under that little handle that I made, move this so that there's not a bunch of wires crossing each other. And now I've got this little handle and I can go move it, and as you can see there must be another copy of the lines somewhere, so let's go look through it really quick. I suspect that, yeah, the overlay. Remember how on the overlay we have the black lines mostly just for the arm crease here, so I'm just going to get rid of the lines up here at the top. And then that should solve the issue for us. And you just want to have it start in a good place where if people press reset, it's in a good spot. Let's go ahead, get rid of that display. We'll show the main display. So good, I'm happy there. If we were to move things out, you could see that little handle. Press undo. So now we need to make sure that the other arm has this inside it as well. Now we put it in the arm clone group. We can go ahead and just clone this group and I am just going to say, I'm going to call the previous one underscore previous, just to make it a little bit more clear for myself. I'm going to plug this in where the other one is plugged in. And then I'm going to drag select across both the arm previous and the arm clone. I'm actually just going to rename this guy to mat arm, because when you're copying and pasting from other files and other scenes, you want to make sure everything's named the same. Also, if you've made master controllers, you need to make sure that all of your layers are named the same that they had been. So I'm going to select both of those, and then I'm going to press center on selection, and then I'm going to open the little group boxes. And as you can see, orange and orange, it's very easy to see where I'm copying from and pasting to. So I want to copy the keyframes from the previous group, and then I want to paste them here, and I want to choose right click, paste special, and then I want to choose under options, validation, match by node layer name. And this is just so that in case there's a different number of elements, like there are now, there's going to be like 1 or 2 extra layers, a drawing layer and a composite and the isolate layers. You need to choose match by node layer name so that it can paste appropriately, because there's a different number of layers. And then I'm going to just check to make sure that it came through. It came through. I can now delete the previous group. I do that all the time. When I'm building a rig, I'll realize, oh, that cloned leg now needs like a scuff on the pants, and that's a separate layer. And so then I'll need to update it to the other group. And it doesn't matter if you're doing it in the cloned group or the original group, you just clone them back and make sure that they're all updated and copy all the keyframes. The great thing about having cloned limbs like this is that both of them are using the same drawings. And so if you draw new hands in one, they will immediately be available in the other cloned group. You do not need to re-clone the group every time you draw new hands. You need to clone the group when you add nodes or elements or deformation chains to one group. So if I added another, like let's say I wanted to do a 6-point arm with another deformer points in the elbow area, because I had made a new deformation chain, I would want to re-clone the arms again to the other side of the body. So there you go. These kind of arms are awesome. They can do everything that you want. If you wanted to, you could go ahead and swap it to being the 1-piece or the 2-piece or the 4-point as your default, whatever you're going to use most. I'm going to just leave it as 2-piece as my default way of animating, and then when I'm animating and I need the wobbly arms, or I just need to do a ton of stuff really fast, I'll swap to the 1-piece or the 4-point and use those. And you can swap back and forth as much as you want. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful.